Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt. My name is Matt and I'm joined by Stefan, Ben and Ewan to discuss our Premier League predictions for the 2024-25 season. We're just a few days away from the season kicking off and there's plenty to discuss. And we're going to start by predicting our champions for the Premier League season. And Ben, you're going to kick us off on this one.
Yep, it's a very tough decision. And to be honest, I think it will be between the same two teams that finished in the top two last season. And I certainly wouldn't be surprised, I don't think anyone would, if Man City lifted a fifth consecutive Premier League title. But I do think this season could be Arsenal's year. It was obviously so close last season, just 2 points between them. And I think there's a number of factors that you could argue that make Arsenal improve this time around. They're quite a young squad still, so they've had that year of experience. They proved last season in the last 6 games they can last the whole season. They won all the last 6 games, including trips to Man United and the North London derby at Tottenham. So big pressure games, they went and won. The relationships they're forming, the centre-back partnership between Gabriel and Saliba, they've had another year, arguably the best centre-back partnership in the world now. The likes of Declan Rice and Kai Havertz have had a year under their belt of playing under Mikel Arteta. They've added Ricardo Calafiori, which I think is going to be key for the big games, because as good as Zinchenko is in the ball defensively, he has been a bit of a liability at times. So having that option to bring in Calafiori as a left-back in the games such as away at Man City or away at Liverpool, I think could be a big factor. For me, perhaps the biggest one, though, in terms of Arsenal being able to clinch that, is keeping Thomas Partey fit. I thought they might bring in a central defensive midfielder this summer. Doesn't look like they're going to. Partey's been fit for the whole pre-season. To be honest, I think if Partey had played the majority of last season, I think Arsenal would have won it last season. But Declan Rice was forced to come back into that holding role and it cost Arsenal dearly. But we know from recent times that Thomas Partey, in terms of fitness and availability, can't be relied upon. So, he needs to prove his fitness this season, and that would be big for Arsenal. I also think I'd like to see a winger through the door before the end of the transfer window. Recently being linked with Kingsley Coman, previously Nico Williams, Johan Bakayoko, but someone with pace to add to that front line. But I think with that winger coming in and with the squad in pre-season, they've looked absolutely brilliant against Bayer Leverkusen and Lyon. I think this could be Arsenal's season to get that first title since 2004.
This may actually surprise our viewers, but all 4 of us selected Arsenal as our predicted champions for the 2024-25 season. So instead of all going through our reasons for why Arsenal could win it, Stefan, I want to ask you why we think Manchester City aren't going to be the ones to lift the title this season.
It's a brave move that we've all gone for, so I hope viewers appreciate that. It'd be very easy to say Manchester City for the upteenth time. But I think it's such a fascinating situation because, Ben's kind of really well put the preparation that Arsenal put in this summer for this coming season. And we've seen, obviously, Mikel Arteta's team do that over the last 2 or 3 years. And I think, in a sense, it's very easy when you're the team chasing the league leader because you have a bar that you have to reach. Whereas with Manchester City, they basically have to set their own bar every year. They have to set their own standards and hope that they're good enough. And I just suspect that this summer's just been one in which, I don't know, they've just been kind of caught on their heels a little bit. There's a lot of talk about people moving on. Of course, Julian Alvarez will probably be confirmed by the time this video goes up. I think he'll be a huge miss for them. We obviously did a video on him last week explaining why he doesn't really quite fit into this team, but he's still a huge player for them. He's still a huge talent that Pep Guardiola loves bringing off the bench or sticking on the right or the left, depending on injuries. So for the fact that he's moving on is a big thing. Equally, there are some players in the squad perhaps beginning to show their age. Kevin De Bruyne was obviously injured for a huge part last season. I thought Kyle Walker looked very slow at the Euros, and he was such a pivotal player for Manchester City last season. So, if Pep Guardiola is still relying on these players, then, they may be in trouble. I know they do have youngsters who could come in. We could very easily see someone like Nico Lewis, for example, slot in for Kyle Walker, and all of a sudden, Man City look amazing. Oscar Bob equally is another player who can come in. And they've also signed Savinho, who might be a decent player. But it just kind of feels like Man City have decided just to kind of stay in place and hope that they can do as well as they did last season, whereas Arsenal are really pushing to kind of go one step further. So it's on a knife's edge. I think there's very little between both teams. And, of course, Pep Guardiola's side have that kind of experience, and they've had that kind of remarkable ability over the last kind of couple of years to not kind of panic when they do go behind and really just kind of finish seasons very strongly. And I don't think, actually, as Ben said, no one would be surprised if they went and did that again this season. But as things stand, and before the transfer window finishes, a lot of business could be done and a lot could change then. But as things stand, I do think Arsenal are better prepared for this coming Premier League season.
And I think that brings us on nicely to our predictions for second place. And I'll kick off with mine. I think it's no surprise that I have Manchester City in second. And I echo a lot of the points that you've made there, Stefan. I think the point of Manchester City standing still is a really crucial one. And the way I was going to say it was, over the last couple of years, Arsenal have been chasing Manchester City, and I don't think Arsenal have sped up this summer. I don't think they've done anything special that they haven't done in recent summers, but Manchester City have stumbled a little bit, and Savinho is the only signing they've managed to bring in this window. You also have the questions we've seen throughout the summer over the futures of Ederson and Kevin De Bruyne, and the big question looming over Man City for the 12 months is whether Pep Guardiola will extend his contract at the end of the season. So we may have a season next year where, on top of the big stars such as Ederson and Kevin De Bruyne, there may be other players who are looking ahead to their future and trying to figure out where they might be if Pep Guardiola does leave the club next summer. But they are still comfortably the second best team in the league. You know, it's Arsenal and City are way above the rest of the teams in the league. So for me, I think City will be comfortably in second place. Ewan, do you have Man City in second as well, or have you gone with the curveball?
Yeah, no, I can City in second, much for the points that people have raised. The only kind of question mark I have over Arsenal is also the mentality. The last couple of seasons they've not been able to get over the line. They've not won a trophy under Arteta since his first season in charge, when they won the FA Cup. So that's my only question. You know, there's been question marks over that. You know, perhaps over celebrating at points before the season's ended. But if you look at their squad, I think they've probably got maybe the best squad. And like you pointed out, there's some issues at City, and I just think that with uncertainty over Guardiola, couple of the players that they will win the league, but I actually think it will be a lot closer at the top in terms of it won't be kind of the top two perhaps as it was last year. I know Liverpool only had 7 points behind or something like that, Arsenal, but I think it'll be a lot closer with clubs like Spurs, United, Villa, Newcastle, all capable of kind of getting closer to City and Arsenal this season.
Ben and Stefan, you both went for Manchester City in second place as well. So we move on to third place. And Ben, I want to start with you on this one. Who have you gone for?
Yeah, I found this really tough, to be honest, to choose third and fourth, because for me, there was sort of four teams that I was umming and ahhing in between. And I thought, no matter what I do, I'm going to end up looking like a div in 9 months' time. But I'm going to go for, I've gone Liverpool third at the moment. That's sort of under the proviso that they do manage to bring Zubimendi in, who looks like he's close to making that move. I think that'll be a great move for Liverpool. I do like the balance of their squad. Again, it's so hard to judge on pre-season, isn't it? But they have looked really good from what I've seen of them. The squad looks balanced, not too many injury problems. Jota looks like he's on fire. It'll be key to get the best out of Trent as well. But I think Liverpool are in a good position. Should Zubimendi come in to get top four, certainly, and maybe that third place. I do think there'll be a little bit of a gap still between the top two, personally. In fourth place, I've actually gone for a bit of a curveball here, but I think Newcastle. Couple of reasons why. I think before the summer, it looked like they were going to lose either Bruno Guimaraes, Alexander Isak, or Anthony Gordon. It looked like they might have to in order to comply with the Premier League's profit and sustainability rules. They've managed to keep all three of those. Sandro Tonali will be coming back at the end of August, which is like a new signing. But the key reason why I think Newcastle are going to get top four potentially is the fact they're not in Europe this season. We've seen it make such a difference before. It looked like they were going to get in the Conference League, but obviously Man United winning the FA Cup meant they missed out. But they had so many injuries problems last season. Towards the end of the campaign, when they got players fit again, they did look like a good side. They've managed to hang on to their best players. Tonali's coming in. I just feel like they could maybe nick fourth. I think also Man United and Tottenham would be the other two teams that I'd look at for in and around those positions. I like Man United's business so far, but I think they need to bring in a holding midfielder personally. I don't think Casemiro's quite at it anymore. So maybe if they can get that over the line, I might maybe consider them for fourth. But in terms of Aston Villa, who I know a lot of people are leaning towards, I think they might struggle in the same way Newcastle did last season in terms of not being in Europe for so long. 1982, the last time, they obviously had a great season, but their squad isn't used to having Champions League football as well to deal with. So I feel like that might be a struggle for them.
Stefan, who joins Arsenal and Manchester City in your top four?
I've also gone for Liverpool in third. Just to really echo what Ben said, I think they have a very balanced squad. We don't have to remember too far back to last season when they were actually in the first half of the season kind of going toe-to-toe with Arsenal and Man City for that league title before injury kind of struck. And I think there's still a huge question mark over Arne Slot. Of course, he has to prove himself at this level, but he seems like a pretty relaxed guy. He seems like he's quite happy to just kind of pick up the baton from Jurgen Klopp and just kind of, evolution rather than revolution, I guess, the word I'm trying to get to. Van Dijk hasn't been sold. Mohamed Salah hasn't been punted off to Barcelona. They haven't rebuilt the tactics. He's more or less sticking with what works. And I think the fact that they'll have a lot of players maybe returning from injury who we didn't get to see much of last season, it really suggests that Liverpool do have a squad perfectly capable of third place, if not higher, to be perfectly honest with you. And in fourth place, I've gone for Aston Villa. I do completely take Ben's points, but I do think Villa have been obviously one of the most active teams in the transfer window. They spent about 180 million euros on players, and you could question some of those players, and it certainly does come across as quite a scattergun approach. But I think the club are preparing themselves for a very long and arduous campaign in a number of competitions. I think the players that they've signed more than make up for the ones they've left. I mean, Onana probably still has something to prove to play if he is going to step into that Douglas Luiz role, but Aston Villa do have other big players there. They've also got John McGinn, who's a probably underrated player. I think Aston Villa fans obviously rate him very highly as a leader. And of course, Ross Barkley comes in with a lot of experience as well. And then Moussa Diaby is the other one who moved on, who was a very good player, but not an exceptional ball winning or a match winning player. And they've obviously signed a number of players there. Another one, Ian Maatsen, who I was extremely impressed with at Dortmund last season. I think he could be one of the signings of the season, to be honest, if he does for Villa what he did for Dortmund last season. But above all else, they've got Unai Emery. And I think that's just really what it comes down to for me when it comes to Villa. I think Unai Emery is probably one of the best coaches in Europe. I think he's one of the best coaches in the Premier League. I think if you look at the points total that Villa have amassed since he arrived at the club, he's more or less confirmed them as a top four side. So I think Villa have got a bit better than they were last season. And I expect them to continue doing that, to be honest with you. So yeah, top four seems perfectly achievable for me.
Ewan, what have you gone for here?
Yeah, I think Liverpool and Man United will be third and fourth. In what place, I'm not yet sure. Like people have echoed about Liverpool, they've got a really solid squad. Obviously not the only club to this point in this video who have not signed in the Premier League, but I don't think there's a huge need to add to their squad as much as maybe other clubs that are around the kind of top four race. United's probably the polar opposite. They brought in, as of now, 2 players, but it looks like De Ligt and Mazraoui are on the way. So I think they've added really well to their squad this summer, and I think if Erik ten Hag can keep his best players fit, which didn't happen last season, I think if you look at Manchester United's strongest 11, then it's equally as good as Liverpool's, for example. I think it can go and it's shown that it can go toe to toe with like some Manchester City has done in the FA Cup final last season. It's going to be consistency. That's why I don't think the guaranteed top four they're going to push City and Arsenal for a league or anything. But I mean, they should, with the players at their disposal becoming top four. I think it'd be a failure if
I think it's safe to say that this will be an extremely competitive top four race, and I did struggle to decide on my final two. I have gone for Aston Villa in third, and I, like Stefan, I completely take on board the points that Ben made. I just think Unai Emery, as you said, Stefan, is such a key factor, and what impressed me most with Emery since he's come into Aston Villa is a lot of the squad that he's been successful and brought into the Champions League were there before he came in. It's a squad that Steven Gerrard couldn't do anything with in his time at the club, but Emery's been able to take those players to this level, admittedly with a few additions. But now that he's had a big summer and he's had a lot of money to spend, and I think they've only spent 50 million net spend this summer, so there still could be another incoming or two for Aston Villa before the window closes. I just think the way that team clicked last season was absolutely incredible, and I feel like they will go from strength to strength this season. In fourth position for me, it was between Liverpool, who I've left out. I think it's going to be a big season of transition for them with the new manager coming in, and off the back of such a successful era with such an intense manager, we'll call them. I think it will just take a while for them to click, and maybe that'll happen towards the end of the season. But I think Tottenham, Manchester United and Newcastle are just going to be a bit ahead of them at the start of the season, and that may keep them above them as the season goes on. And it's tough for me to decide which one, because all three of them had really bad injury issues last season. Admittedly, Newcastle and Man United a lot more, so it's hard to gauge exactly where they're at. But I just think the business that Man United have already managed to do this summer, and the players, Ewan, like you mentioned, that they will be bringing in over the coming days, and maybe a midfielder as well before the window closes, I just think that's an incredibly balanced squad, and it's got a bit more depth to it than it did last year. So if injuries do become a factor again, I think United probably have what it takes to deal with that a little bit better. So I'll go and I'll put them in fourth. Let us know in the comments down below your Premier League predictions. Who's going to be the champions? Will Man City make it 5 in a row, or will Arsenal end their wait for a Premier League title? Let us know as well who you think will round out the top 4, and let us know who you think had the best predictions on the panel here today. Hit the subscribe button down below if you want more of this content throughout the summer. But as always, thanks for watching.